And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick here with Katie Greifeld. We're taking you through to that closing bell with a global simulcast. Joining us right now is Massar and Tim Stenovec in the radio booth. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, including our partnership with YouTube. As we count you down to the closing bells, just about a minute and a half to go. And we are going to focus on the markets here for just a bit here, Carol, as we see a pretty sizable rally on our hands to close out the month of November.
Yeah, kind of interesting to see what is happening in the trade this week. And even, you know, as maybe there's some, I don't know, light volume and so on and so forth ahead of the holiday season here and Thanksgiving holiday, it does feel like investors some optimism. And a lot of it probably has to do with expectations that indeed we get another cut by the Federal Reserve, that meeting, the FOMC meeting just a few weeks away now, Tim.
Off our best levels of the day for the S&P 500. And interestingly enough, earlier in the session, it was more broad-based. We saw more than 4 stocks in the S&P 500 higher for every 1 stock that was lower. But now we're seeing 372 higher and 129 in the S&P 500 lower right now.
And really, what a rally we've seen this week alone. Probably not a lot of volume backing that up, but still, as Romaine pointed out earlier, when it comes to the month of November, the S&P 500 getting closer and closer to erasing those losses. This is the last full trading day of November, but we do have that half-day session coming up on Friday.
We should also point out a lot of the key technical levels that were really under pressure just last week. Apparently, at least for the S&P and the NASDAQ, they've survived that test, now closing back above some of those intermediate moving averages here on this Wednesday afternoon. Green across the screen for most of the major indices here in the U.S., including the Dow Jones Industrial Average, higher by more than 300 points or 0.6%. We'll call it 0.7% to be precise. A similar move on a percentage basis for the S&P 500 higher. The NASDAQ Composite up about 0.8%. And you had relative marginal, I guess, keeping pace here. The Russell 2000 up about 0.8% here to close out the day. It had been up more than 1%, but seeing a little bit of profit taking into the close.
All right, I'm going to go back to the big caps, the S&P 500. We did see a few more names higher earlier in the session overall. Right now, though, the S&P finishing with a gain, as we said, but about 360 names in that index higher at the close, 142 to the downside, Katie, 1 unchanged. But again, we saw more than, I think, 400 names gaining earlier in the session.
Yeah, and you saw pretty good breadth when it comes to the sector performance as well. As you can see on the screen, information technology was your biggest gainer on the day in terms of points contribution, followed by financials, consumer discretionary, and consumer staples. In terms of what didn't exactly perform on this Wednesday, healthcare falling a bit, and communication services down about 0.5%. A lot of that decline came down to Alphabet giving back some of the gains that we've seen that stock enjoy over the past couple days.
I mean, occasionally it has to give back. I mean, what is it up? Like almost 70% this year?
What goes up? What goes up?
Two sides to every trade. Hey, let's get to some of the individual gainers, if I may. I'm going to start with Dell Technologies. It's a top gainer in the S&P 500. This one finishing up 5.8% on the day. The company reported earnings late last night. It did raise its full-year forecast. Analysts noting growth in AI server shipments as a highlight due to sustained demand for machines needed in the current data center boom. So just let me throw some numbers at you. Dell booking $12.3 billion of AI server orders on the fiscal third quarter. That ended October 31st. It shipped $5.6 billion worth of the servers and ended the quarter with a backlog of $18.4 billion. The company raised shipment projections for the year to $25 billion from $20 billion. So some outperformance there. Let's go to the retailers. One in particular, because we've seen their earnings coming out over the last couple of weeks. Urban Outfitters finishing the day with a gain of more than 13%. The owner of Anthropologie and Free People, following positive reports from Abercrombie and also Gap. We got that's some of their peers, so we also heard some upbeat stuff from them. Shares of Urban Outfitters jumping. The company reported net sales for the third quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. Stock, by the way, it's up roughly 40% year to date, but about 15% of the float is short. JP Morgan and Barclays both raising their price targets on that stock. And I'm going to finish up with Robinhood Markets. That stock up about 11%. It's the number one gainer in the S&P 500 today. Company announced that it and Susquehanna International buying a majority stake in LedgerX. That's a U.S.-based derivatives exchange once owned by FTX, now run by Miami International Holdings. The deal giving the companies access to the prediction markets, which is something we've talked about a lot here in 2025. By the way, Robinhood Markets, it is up about 235% year to date. Quite a run.
Okay. Well, if you'd predicted that I would do decliners next, you would be correct. Starting with John Deere, Deere & Company, down 5.7%. The company's weak forecast for the year ahead reinforces the difficulty in predicting a recovery in U.S. farm economy due to uncertainty over the impact of tariffs and trade deals. The company's forecast for 2026 net income of $4 to $4.75 billion missed the average Bloomberg estimate and would be a drop from the $5.027 billion reported for the year just ended. Once again, shares of Deere down 5.7%. Also, taking a look at Alphabet Inc., GOOGL down 1.1%. It was actually on a points basis the biggest decliner in the S&P 500 today. That company, those shares giving back a bit of the recent rally. Just to put this recent rally into context, it's up 15% just since November 11th. It's up 34% since September and up just roughly 70% so far this year. Giving back a little bit of that rally, down 1.1% today. And finally, Zscaler down 13%, falling the most going back to September of 2024, so in more than a year. This after the company forecast annual revenue that came in only slightly above estimates. Investors certainly wanted to see more. Romaine.
All right, let's check in on yields here. Kind of a weird day here. Your 10-year yield has been sort of straddling the line on that 4% level. Looks like it's going to settle just below that. You saw yields on the longer end of the curve also move lower, including the 20 and 30-year, though a slight uptick in yields on the 2-year yield, up about 2 basis points, despite the fact that when you look at pricing in the Fed funds futures market, you now have most traders now anticipating or at least betting on about a 90% chance right now that we're going to get a rate cut, a 25% percentage point rate cut at the Fed's meeting on December 9th and 10th.
Yeah, man, how that has changed since the last Fed meeting and what we've heard from Jay Powell.